If I should walk in the valley of death, no evil would I fear.
Pause. Choose to remember when you first saw a death, heard about death. How old were you? How did you feel? Fascinated, detached, curious, frightened, mystified, anxious, indifferent. Sit with that young self. Hold their hand. Dialogue with that aspect of yourself. Talk about life. Talk about death. If necessary, adjust your current belief about death. Part 1. The Therapy of Seeing. I was born in a small village upstate New York into a strict, conservative, Roman Catholic family. Interviews I did with my mother reveal that I was outgoing, always giving flowers, surviving milk allergies and childhood diseases. I lived even though approximately 200,000 people die every day. My childhood was immersed in Catholic ritual, prayers, and parochial school. At recess, the girls would walk around the cemetery next to the school telling stories about death, premature burials, stories about unearthed coffins that were found filled with fingernails stuck in the gorged satin lids. All of us have watched TV shows like Hard Copy 2020 and have our own stories of death. All of us have internet, YouTube. For example, we have heard of coffins designed with windows so the deceased can see outside, or with bells to inform the living of the mistake that was made, or of videos included both above and below ground, leaving messages for the living and TV in the grave for the dead, who might still want to watch the nightly news. Death was always a fascination for me, but one that felt taboo in its mystery. At 7, I was taught by the nuns that if I sinned, the devil would send me to hell when I died, where I would burn forever, but that Jesus died for our sins and offered an opportunity for salvation. None of it seemed very happy. It was about piercings and crucifixion, a sacred, somber event. Often I would faint in church. Everything was so ponderous and unspeakably, devastatingly ecstatic. Everything was suffering. At 20, I appropriated my greatest fear, death, suffering, by making a crucifix. This junk sculpture magically related me to Jesus, allowed me to speak the same language, and to be Christ the only way I knew how, by depicting suffering myself. A later fiberglass sculpture, 1967, entitled Death, was another attempt to explore my feelings about the subject, to look at a taboo by making art about it. Art became a safe space, often the only place where I could explore my fears and fascination. Pause. How would you make art about death? What would it look like? Be like? Death elicits emotions of terror, sadness, anxiety. But I continued to study it, looked at it, hoping the denial would diminish. Part 2, the therapy of knowing. An incredibly influential spiritual friend and teacher in this process has been Dr. R.S. Mishra, Shri Brahmananda Saraswati, my guru and patient guide. Since my meeting with him in 1971, he has said over and over, "Linda, you were not born, you cannot die. You are not the body and mind. Unless you understand your own death, you will have dis-ease." End quote. His teachings are simple yet complex, Eastern yet Western. Once I began meditating under his direction, my Roman Catholic fear of death and the devil were no longer the dreaded enemy, but eventually became words and issues that I could experience and examine from another cultural and mythological perspective. Yoga literally saved my life and my soul, and I would like to thank all of my Eastern teachers, Jain, Hindu, Tibetan, Zen, Sufi, and the Latins for opening my psyche to their spiritual technology. Pause. Who is your death teacher? What do they tell you about death? How does your death teacher prepare you for your death? These two stories I will read of death experiences are totally different, but equally inspiring. First, some masters pass away in sitting meditation with the body supporting itself. Kalu Rinpoche, one of my teachers, died in 1989 in the Himalayas, with a number of masters and a doctor and nurse present. His closest disciple wrote, "Rinpoche tried to sit up, had difficulty. One of the lamas felt it would be good to support his back so he could sit. He wanted to sit absolutely straight, indicating with a hand gesture and saying so. The doctor and nurse were upset by this, so Rinpoche relaxed his posture slightly. He nevertheless assumed a meditation posture, placed his hands in meditation mudra, opened his eyes in meditation gaze, and his lips moved in mantra. A profound feeling of peace and happiness settled on us all and spread through our minds. All of us present felt that the indescribable happiness that was filling us was the faintest reflection of what was pervading Rinpoche's mind. Slowly, Rinpoche's gaze and his eyelids lowered and the breath stopped." Second death story. In a March 1996 National Enquirer, Katharine Hepburn is quoted as saying, quote, "If I'm going to die, I'll be damned if it is here in a hospital surrounded by strangers. I'm going to die in my own bed with my family at my bedside." End quote. After she signed herself out of a New York hospital where she had been admitted with pneumonia, she told a relative, quote, "Dry your tears and don't be sad because I'm going to join Spencer now. I've waited almost 30 years for this moment. I want to take him into my arms again." End quote. Neither of these great beings fear death. How does your death teacher help you not fear death? To prepare myself for my death, I continued to study meditation. And after experiencing the exhilaration of meditation training, I began going inside publicly as art, doing sensory experiments, often blindfolded for a week, to explore dying to one of my senses. Ramana Maharshi, an eloquent death teacher, suggests we die daily. He overcame death anxiety after years of meditative experiences. In 1970, I began a series of death simulations, lying as if dead, having seen my embalmed grandparents in coffins as if asleep. Lying as if dead, hypnotized to sleep, dream, and sing the dream, 1973. In placing the template of death over my work, I contend that everything that I have ever done has been an act of death or manifestation of grief. Basically, my art has been appeasing my own death anxiety by allowing me to die over and over and grieve as art. I use these slides from other cultures and their death rituals to expand and illustrate this thesis that we all deal with death uniquely and culturally. In Israel, the body is not taboo. It is tenderly washed, not embalmed. It is shrouded and buried. If the death has occurred in the Holy Land, it is not coffined. Gypsy tribal kings had extended families, including several hundred members who must attend their funerals. The wake continues 3 days. All camp in and around the funeral home. The open casket contains a change of clothes because the dead are thought to return. Gold coins are placed in the casket on the eyes. Emotions include loud weeping. They kiss the forehead and knuckles. And a funeral feast is eaten in the same room where the body lies. The funeral procession is a spectacle with music, violins, flowers. At the grave, the casket is opened again, and all cry out in Romany their sorrows. The women fall on their knees and hit their heads against tombstones, knocking themselves out. More coins are thrown in the casket, wine poured in, and wailing continues. A cloth is then spread on the ground next to the grave, and a feast is eaten. A dead Nigerian chief swaddled after having been washed and rubbed with aromatic herbs. Chiefs are buried in a sitting position, symbolic of his reigning in life from a throne or a royal stool. The chief is lowered into the ground, and a ceramic pot with a small hole is placed over the tomb. The hole allows the chief's soul to pass through it. 1971, sitting, my version. Igbo Nigerian medicine man is painted white to keep away the spirits of death. At death, his tools are gathered, sacrificial blood spilled on them to keep death away. The closest kin painted white. The women dance a dance of sorrow. Then the dead person was taken from his hut, sat on a chair to be viewed, and buried in his own backyard. A small leaf roof marked the grave. 1971, sitting, my version.
Are you the descendant of an ethnic group? How does your group address death and death rituals? If you have no death traditions, how would you personally design a ritual? See it, feel it, hear it, practice it.
At certain times in our history, death has been glorified, romanticized, gilded, sentimentalized. But the 90s has changed the climate of death. Anyone who has seen a person die of AIDS or advanced cancer knows that disease is not romantic. My teacher has said, TV has made Buddhas of us all. And he would add, the YouTube has made Buddhas of us all, referring to the fact that we see images of suffering, as did the Buddha when he left his father's palace and saw a corpse for the first time. AIDS deaths can include tubes, respirators, sores, lesions, inflated and cooled mattresses, balding, infections. Men and women reduced to skeletons. Cancer, AIDS, the media has politicized death. It can no longer be avoided or sentimentalized. Our next challenge is to keep it from being commodified. Part 2, Movement in Death. Golden Gate Bridge, a dance for all who committed suicide on the bridge. British funeral procession. In all cultures, the therapy of movement is included in the death rituals. In America, cars move funerally with police escort, lights on, stopping traffic, and the oncoming, outgoing breath of the onlookers. Movements in other countries may include contortions of the limbs, jumping, running, rolling the eyes, injury to the self, using weapons. The commonality is that actions continue until the mourner is exhausted and clear of emotion. In Korea, a canopy-covered sanyu holds the dead. In New Orleans, brothers and sisters dance in defiance of death. A marshal and band proceed the hearse, and there is an explosive shout erupting from the crowd under the hot New Orleans sun. Are you still alive? Yeah. Do you like to dance? Yeah. Do you want to dance? Yeah. Well, damn it, let's go. Story of my life. Making funeral poles is a major emotional outlet for Australian Aborigines, cut from bloodwood trees 20 feet high, 3 feet diameter. They are smoked over a fire after carving. Each man makes one. It is not a profession, but a social duty. Songs and dances are held around the poles. Relatives dance as if there was something wrong with them, with their legs, their arms. Women held their breasts, as if injured. At the grave, they slash their scalps with knives, beat their bodies with clubs, and perform other ritual expressions of grief. The poles are left on the burial site to weather. Marble sculpture, 1965, my funeral pole. Step 3, the therapy of mourning and burial customs. Hungarian woman in white mourning clothes, a hand-embroidered death cloth hangs by her side. Son of the deceased, painted white to keep away the spirits of death, views the dances with a profound look. After my ex-husband, Mitchell Payne's tragic murder in 1977, I mourned on video, I mourned in performance, I mourned by writing, I mourned by going on retreat. After 2 years, I was able to join the world again. In other cultures, inner pressures resulting from loss include making inarticulate sounds, such as moaning, sobbing, screaming, keening, shouting, ululating.
Pause. Listen to your heart. What does your heart say about death? Listen to each room of the heart. Room 1, room 2, room 3, room 4, Listen to your heart. 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 Listen to your heart.
I mourned by listening and by telling guilt from the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. Persians bury their dead in the Temple of Silence. First, the dead body is laid on a stone slab. With a nail, 3 circles are drawn around it, and no one but funeral bearers can enter the circle. Sandalwood incense keeps demons disguised as flies away. A dog leads the funeral procession, and tradition says a dog would howl in terror if the body were not really dead. The body is placed on iron, not wood, because the body is taboo, restricted, and would defile the elements. Therefore, it is not cremated because it would contaminate the fire. So the body is placed on a ledge inside the hollow Temple of Silence. Vultures strip the body in a few hours, and then the bones are gathered from the ledge and thrown into the deep pit in the center of the Temple of Silence. A Hindu, on the other hand, can be cremated. At death, the body is garlanded. The navel is oiled, nostrils plugged, big toes tied together, relatives informed, women lament. Mortuary specialists perform the ceremony since death is defiling. The bank of the Ganges and especially Benares are the most auspicious place for cremations. There the waterfront is given over to burning ghats, a place where funeral pyres are built. When the body reaches the site, it is immersed in Ganges water, then placed on the pyre, smeared with ghee, and the sun lights the fire. A torch at the head for a man, at the feet for a woman. Mourners march around the fire, and although they are forbidden to look into the flames, they must notice if the skull bursts. If not, the sun hits it with an implement, since Hindus believe that at death the soul is trapped in the skull, and breaking it releases the soul. Then the mourners bathe in the river and recite, "Vain is he who seeks to find the changeless in the human form. Life must terminate in death." Part 4, Therapy for Mourners. The following is a list of purification rites collected from different cultural traditions. They include restrictions which help revenge the death and appease ancestors' ghosts. Pull out hair, shave head, not wash hair, not comb hair, no butter in hair for a year, mimic battle, sift sand on body, wear a band on wrist, sacrifice a herd of oxen, neglect gardens and fields, no jewelry worn, paint body, wear copper ring, go into seclusion, cut the thumb, no touching cooking pots, erect memorial stones, burn down the hut, carve poles, fasting, girl delivers water to all homes, go bareheaded, wear black, wear white, leave hair unbraided, plant tree on grave, say novenas, sit in the house, receive mourners.
Pause. If you had complete permission to mourn any way you would like, what would you do? What would you not do?
In my own experience, guilt and unfinished business with the death of friends have been my biggest obstacles with this subject of death. I invite only those who feel most comfortable to join me in the following visualization in saying goodbye to a dear loved one. The visualization is taken from the book, The Tibetan Way of Living and Dying, by Sogyal Rinpoche. Can you imagine the face of a dead loved one? Keep your heart open. With your whole heart and mind, visualize that this loved one is looking at you with a greater love and understanding than he or she ever had while alive. Know the dead person wants you to understand that he or she loves you, forgives you, wants to ask for your forgiveness, then truly say farewell and really let go of the person. End quote. In 1973, I was handcuffed to Tom Marioni for 3 days. Was it a mourning ritual? Is danger a way to avenge death? Is this kind of art, mourning, a premature death-like action which homeopathically keeps death away, tricking death by acting as if it has already happened in art? Was being tied by a 6-foot rope a ritual of penance and alteration of consciousness? By staying tied for a year, to Taishin Shea in his performance, Art Life 1-year performance, I died a little every day. When my mother died, I had a chance to redefine my beliefs. It was 10 years after my ex-husband's death. And with my mother's death in 1987, I was ready for some new information about death. My mother, an artist.
This valley, they say, you are going. We will miss your bright stars and sweet smile. For they say you are taking the sunshine that has in our pathway a while. Come and sit by my side if you love me. Don't hasten to bid me adieu. Just remember the red river valley and the cowgirl who loves you so true.
A Balinese effigy is burned at funerals. In my life, it seemed as if each of myselves was an effigy dying as my mother died slowly of colon cancer. And after 5 years, she died painfully in the hospital, drugged, prodded, poked, and in excruciating pain. Each year of 7 years of living art and another 7 years of living art, I died. I changed accent, persona, color, sound. It was my way of dying to myself. I was losing my mother, my friend, and myself. Gained an expansive spaciousness and feel of the void that is ever present. Stephen and Andrea Levine write, quote, "The death of the body is accompanied by less agony than the death of an ego. The death of ego is a tearing away of everything we imagine to be solid, a crumbling of the walls we have built to hide behind. Letting go of self-protection, there may arise dizziness and nausea. When all we imagine ourselves to be dies, everything is seen in its essentially empty, impermanent nature. End quote.
Pause. Who have you lost? What does your spaciousness feel like?
Current preparation. We baby boomers are aging. As we age, we transform and observe the body's decay, the change in metabolism, graying at the temples, middle age, stomach, lowering of energy levels, lessening muscle tone, loss of hair. How, without silicone implants, cosmetic surgeries, collagen injections, vitamins, liposuction, can we deny the temporariness of this body? We cannot disregard death.
Pause. Meet yourself as a 108-year-old. What is the message your elder self gives to you?
Step 4, the therapy of study. As death comes further and further out of the closet, blushing with shame, and the innocence of newness, we continue our research. How to do that? 1. Talking with elders. My 80-year-old father said when I was complaining about car insurance, house, etc., quote, "What's all of that in the face of eternity?" End quote. 2. Writing our wills, our living wills, making provisions to donate organs. 3. Choose the officiant for our funerals now. Will it be Father Amara? Will it be Sister Rose? 4. We can decide ecological ways to dispose of the body. A. Plains Indians scaffold burial. B. Balinese effigies are burned with the body. C. Himalayan priests summon flesh-eating birds with a horn made from a human femur to eat the dead body. D. Sioux Indians bury their dead in trees. E. Will we decide to take up space and be buried on this shrinking planet? Five, we can take charge of our death by defining and experiencing consciousness while we are alive. 6, we can face death by living life fully and laughing with it and at it. 7, we can face death by letting go of those who have already died.
Pause. How do you envision a ceremony for your death? Who will be there? What will be said? What will be done?
As we complete this process together, let's take one last look at the subject from 7 different aspects of ourselves.
Pause. Can you imagine your sex self addressing death? How would that aspect of yourself relate? What would be said or done? Can you imagine the earthbound you addressing death? What would they say to death about your possessions, about your money, about your house, about your things, about your car? Can you imagine the courageous, gutsy you addressing death? Can you imagine the compassionate, loving you addressing death? self-addressing death. Can you imagine your intuitive self-addressing death? Can you imagine your joy addressing death?
The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. Fresh and green are the pastures where he gives me repose. Near restful waters he leads me to revive my drooping spirit. He guides me along the right path, he is true to his name. If I should walk in the valley of death, no evil would I fear. You are there with your crook and your staff, with these you give me comfort. You have prepared a banquet for me in the sight of my foes. My head you have anointed with oil, my cup is overflowing. Surely goodness and kindness shall follow me all the days of my life. In the Lord's own house shall I dwell forever and ever.
Shankara Maravakate Tarana Maravokate Tanala Katata Bajana Maravokota Maravasahana Dekatatopo Shankara Nanigata de Paravasukoti no Maravaso Horan Katata Paravasaha Sara Nigahasa Hangara Paravasakata Nishukota Shumaro.
Now when the barter of becoming dawns upon me, I will concentrate my mind one-pointedly and strive to prolong the results of good karma, close the womb entrance and think of resistance. This is the time when perseverance and pure thought are needed. Abandon jealousy and meditate on the Guru with his consort. With mind far off, not thinking of death's coming, performing these meaningless activities, returning empty-handed now would be complete confusion. The need is recognition, holy Dharma, so why not practice Dharma at this very moment? From the mouths of siddhas come these words: if you do not keep your Guru's teaching in your heart, will you not become your own deceiver?
If I should walk in the valley of death, no evil would I fear.